Welcome everybody to episode 74 of the Corner Blue. I'm Andres Rico and I'm here with Hugo Alvarado. And here we are, end of 2024 for La Selecta. Last window for Nations League for La Selecta. And here we are, Hugo. How you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Looking forward to what's coming up. Happy to be back in the League A, and Gold Cup, of course. As much as probably a lot of us have become used to Gold Cup almost being a given, I think that there were different factors this time in the way that the qualification takes place, which I think you have to work a little harder to qualify.
Yes, so El Salvador, as you may already know, ekes out two identical score lines of 1-0 versus Bonaire and Montserrat to close out Nations League B, and double dipping at the same time to qualify for League A and Gold Cup 2025. What are your sensations of the two matches? Because I feel like it of course, in true Selecta style, yet even though we qualified for those two tourneys, there's a lot of discontent in the air.
Well, I have a few positive observations. I think there's been too much talk already about the not winning the games by the score that a lot of people were expecting or wanting us to win. I include myself in that. But in terms of what I've observed in how the team was structured, the lineup and how the team played, I'm starting to see a positive glimpse of hope in terms of we talked in probably the last episode when we made reference to that presentation that Doniga had given for the that program, the coach's voice. I don't know if it was the coach's voice.
It was a master class, yeah, for coach's voice.
The master's class, right, where we observed that that the team will always play from the back and kind of stick to one side of the one half of the field and play there, trying to pass the ball around to create opportunities where the opponent might make a mistake. And if they would close all opportunities for us, then we would go for that long ball to the number 9 on top, hoping to win second balls. And we saw a lot of that. I think the first 3 games, the first 3 games of the Nations League, that was the way we played. And for me, in the last game that we played in the Caribbean, we saw something different. And I believe I mentioned that I like that we saw something different, that we saw the ball being distributed more
when they took
equally,
the loss.
When they took the loss, unfortunately. And then coming to the Cusca and seeing that we kind of continue with that style as opposed to going back to the other formation where we stuck to playing from the back on one side of the field. I'm starting to see some positive results, and some of those positive results is that we have to look at the number of opportunities that we created on both games. Unfortunately, the last game, the second half, was terrible field conditions, and people might say, yeah, but it was horrible for both. True, but when your style is to put the ball on the ground, even if you do that from the back until you reach half of the field and then you go for that long ball to the defenders on the defender's back, it affects you, and it affected us tremendously. I think But anyways, going back to the opportunities, we created a lot of opportunities, and you don't create opportunities just because you got lucky and you created opportunities. Obviously, you must be doing something good to be putting your team in situations of scoring situations, and we missed quite a few amount of goals, and I think that is not so much a problem with the system. That is more of having more accuracy when you shoot, and that's more of an individual players thing. So no, I'm not celebrating con bombos y platillos, but the results are there. And how many times when Hugo Perez was the coach, how many times did we hear the media that is now attacking Donigan and a certain sector of the fans say that they didn't care how the team played, that football is a sport of results? I'm gonna leave it at that.
Uh, Hugo dropping the mic here on the corner blue. Um, I'd say, with the two matches, the one that I liked the least was against Bonaire. I'm still having a hard time understanding what the point is of playing with a back line of three defenders. Then you're sending your fullbacks up there, but then it's almost like he's flooding the flanks with the fullbacks and the wingers, and then he's leaving Christian right in front of the back line of three. So you're still playing with the back line of four essentially, and then just flooding the flanks. And it was just the Bonaire game was the most disjointed one where there was no mid. It was basically just Christian helping the very slow defenders that we had due to, Civilian having to clear suspension for too many yellows. But you see El Catracho Romero in there and Dominguez, they were slide tackling late. They were missing their marks. The players for Bonaire were making runs at their back and getting through. And Christian was literally the only one with speed helping out in front of them, which left the whole entire mid completely open because you had Darwin floating, and then that was it. So it was very confusing at times to try and decipher or see where the pieces are supposed to go. Because, like I said, it seems like we're playing with those fullbacks, whether it's Larin, Tamacas, or Nelson or Tereso, just running down the flanks, and then you have the wingers right in front of him, but then you leave the nine by himself, and then Darwin's all over the place, and it's like, yeah, we lost the mid completely in Bonaire, and like Bonaire's one professional player just made everything look bad in the mid. So fortunately, we got the win, right? With Steven Vasquez scoring that game. Then you look at the Montserrat game. The first half, I think, was indicative of where this team is going, where fortunately the drainage system in Cusca lasted not only all the previous games, since there had been at least 3 games played on the pitch, the rain, the horrible weather conditions. So at least there was one good half where La Selecta was able to play on the pitch somewhat uninterrupted, because people always talk shit on Cusca, which is, it's one that merit. But if you compare the conditions of the field this time versus the One Nations League match against the US, where it was a complete lodazal, and it wasn't even raining. Like there was a big significant difference. And at least there was that one good half where you saw what an Ordaz can bring to this team once he has people to play off of. We saw Tejada, come out of. I feel like this was Tejada's obviously his best game, where you saw him getting into the box with people to play off of, which is something that we don't see that often, is getting numbers in the box. Usually we get stuck playing 2 versus 4, 2 versus 5 in the box. So despite the scoreline not reflecting it, the first half I think was one of the better ones that we've seen. against Caribbean teams, and that's that we've played 9 games total against Caribbean teams in 2024. Um, and finally, there was a chance to do it in front of the home crowd, which in a sense kind of backfired too. But I'd say, yeah, the first half against Montserrat was one of the better ones at home throughout the year. You saw the team more relaxed. You saw Ordaz with his first touch. You saw him cutting to the left, which I saw your post where you said it was reminiscent of another lefty based out of the U.S. by the name of Arturo Alvarez. I think there's a good sign when you're getting the results or goals and they're coming from kids that are under 23 years old, under 24 years old. Like you're seeing Steven Vasquez, you're seeing uh, Emerson Mauricio scoring, you're seeing Tejada scoring, and you're seeing Francis Castillo scoring recently. So there's a streak of at least 4 or 5 games where the players that aren't necessarily your marquee number nines, the kids that are up and coming, the kids that have fewer than 10 caps under their belt are starting to show up. And I think our resistance, or at least on my behalf, my resistance to seeing, Donigas basically rebuild since January, you're starting to see some of the fruits rising from it with all these young kids that are starting to score goals. And I think that's very important where there isn't a dependence on one single player that Doniga has different pieces that he can throw in, and depending on whether they're what their fitness level is or how they're doing, people will rise to the occasion. I think that's the main importance of this last match window.
Yes, I agree with you. I was not. First of all, the addition of Ordaz is it's a big one. I don't think we should put too much pressure on him, given that he's a 20-year-old or 19-year-old, um, and he played against a lower ranked team. However, when a player is a good player, you see it immediately, and he has a lot of quality. He can change. It's interesting because a single player sometimes can really change the way a team can play. Not that that single player is going to make the team win all games, but it does help the team perform better and look better. You mentioned Bonaires number 10. Um, if you just let's just go back to when we had a Cheo Quintanilla. The game revolved around him,
Mhm.
around Quintanilla, and players like that make a big difference. But it's very positive. Um, it's positive when you have such a young team. When you have, Francis Castillo hasn't even played in Cadiz. But so far with the national team, he's shown that he has some pretty interesting qualities. I hope that Cadiz follows through and he does that he's given a fair opportunity over there, whether that's with the reserve team or I think he was supposed to sign with the reserve team. Steven Vasquez, Tejada. Yeah, we have such a young team. Tereso, I must say, I'll raise my hand. I was not a big fan of Tereso when he first started getting called to the national team. And 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 um and now I'm very, very, very pleased to see that we have an alternative to Tamacas, because it used to be Tamacas always our right back. And yes, Tamacas has more, he has more athleticism, but Tereso has really come a long way, in my opinion, to the point where I am almost equally happy regardless of who plays on the right, whether that's Tamacas or Tereso. Um, and with that being said, kind of changing the subject a little bit, I think it's unfair the treatment that players like Bonilla and Ladin and Seren are getting. Yes, Seren has made a lot of mistakes, especially in the previous when we had Perez. He made a lot of mistakes, but
Or his
the
disastrous
reality,
World Cup with De Los Goals too, with the biting
yeah,
and shit.
right. Um, but in the local league, which is what's feeding our current national team, he's probably the best uh, number eight that we have in the local league. And where are you calling your players? You're calling them from the local league. So if he wasn't getting called, people will be saying that it's unfair that the best mixed box to box midfielder is not getting called to the national team. And then when it comes to Bonilla, not only is he a leader in the team, but I I, I see people saying negative things about him his first half against Bonaire. And honestly, the opportunities that people are saying that he missed, they're not missed. They're opportunities that he created for himself because he put himself in the right situation. I didn't see any chance that Bonilla had that I can clearly say if Steven had been there, he would have scored that one. So I still think Bonilla is a player that can bring a lot to the table for us. I disagree with uh, with some people who say that he's our fifth forward. I actually I wish he had gone in sooner against Montserrat. I was here at home watching the game and I kept telling my dad, we need Bonilla in there. We need Bonilla in there, especially when Steven didn't have his best game against Montserrat. It's probably one of his um, weakest games. I think that he's had with the national team, and then with the conditions of the field, and our resource was long balls to the box. At that point, a player like Bonilla can really make a difference because he's a nine. He's not the biggest player, but he has pretty decent size and he knows how to fight balls up in the air. Um, Larin probably played one of his best games against Bonaire. So I do think it's unfair all the criticism that these players are getting, and
But
sometimes we
that's
for
why they're there. That's why they're there. And I feel like this is
exactly
what this is a positive aspect of them being there is that they absorb
they
a
have that
lot of the criticism, a lot of the hate, which in
right,
turn relieves the pressure off of the guys behind them. And this is why
right,
these guys were key, should have been key throughout the last couple of qualifying campaigns. I mean, yes, is their level the level that's going to take us to the World Cup? It is yet to be proven, right? There, you could argue that they've either peaked, that they're on the decline, but it's your vets that will absorb this type of scrutiny, this type of negative energy, the criticism, and give you some leeway. So as a team, you can deflect that shit basically. And
yeah,
that's something that was in a sense kind of lacking in the last qualifying campaign. And I hope that, you know, they rise as leaders within this team. They can deflect some of that. And then the team can basically like acuerparlos, as the team chemistry isn't altered because of the BS, and the people that are there, the personnel that is there wants to be there, knows their roles, and can contribute in any way possible. And I think that is going to be super key going into next year is, there's been the drama with the Heans, but since then, I'd be curious to know what is the feeling in the locker room? What is the overall chemistry now that that chapter has passed? And are people buying into things? And I think that's key because despite the hate, despite, the, I would say pretty lackadaisical performances. No temos paja. Like, I'm sorry, 1-0s. You eked out results against lowly teams at home. And, we would all want to see at the results fine, but at least performances that give us a little more faith or hope in this team. And yeah, we scratch these wins out. But at the end of the day, the results are there. If the team is buying in, because slowly you see that little progression in a year, in a year, in a year, we've seen that progression. Players are starting to settle in. There's names there that we wouldn't have expected, we wouldn't have wanted. But if this team starts to buy into the idea or their capacity, I think that in and of itself is a plus. If we were still where we were in February, March of this year, or if we were, uh, you know, if we were still at the point where we were when Trinidad kicked us out of League A, when was it, last year? Like we'd be in serious trouble. And I think you're starting to see something germinate in terms of, this team. And I hope, and it's from afar, obviously, right? I would really want to know what the chemistry of the team was when everyone left after the win. And I think that will be a huge determining factor is if people are there, are they buying into it? Are they there because they want to? And we just heard the interview with Gavin Santamaria come out. When was it? Yesterday. And from someone that was vocal for whatever reasons on social media and would criticize decisions and vented online, for someone that didn't get any minutes, I felt like there was a huge turnaround in terms of his demeanor, attitude, where he didn't get any minutes, but he's buying into this team. And I think that is key. And I think it might be telling of Doniga as a leader in this sense, where if he's getting dudes to fly in hours, not getting any minutes, and they're buying in, that's the kind of personnel that you want. Obviously, it's from afar. I have no idea, right? But I think it's indicative of something positive.
Yeah, and he said it in the interview yesterday that that even though he didn't get any minutes, he wants to be there, and he's looking forward to being back, and that's obviously a very good attitude to have. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think overall we can sense, I can sense again from afar that um, there's better chemistry. I'm in no way saying that the heel should never be back. No, I still believe that it is important to have a healthy locker room, a healthy relationship in the locker room. The team is going to perform better when everybody gets along, or at least when everybody has the same goal in mind. It doesn't mean you have to be friends, doesn't mean you have to go out for coffee, but you have one goal in common, and the goal is the national team, not your individual performance, not doing really well with the national team so you can get a better contract, but the national team. And of course, if the national team does great, those contract opportunities are going to come for those players who are exceeding the performance, the group performance, the ones that are show up individually. But it needs to be with a common goal, which is the Salvadorian national team. That should be number one. Um, and the other thing that I want to mention with that, probably a very different contrast, because Santa Maria, it's an experienced player who, yes, he's playing the second division in Peru, but he also had some games in the first division. And at times, he's been a good player for the national team. I haven't seen much of that in his most recent games, but still, I still think he's a good player. But I wanted to mention about Gabriel Azevedo, where he was called. The kid is from Palmeiras U20. He has recently, less than 6 months ago, joined Palmeiras U20. And I keep seeing people saying, like, You made him fly all the way from Brazil to not even give him 1 minute. I'm like, in what world do we live in? Like seriously, he's a 19-year-old player from a U20 team who got called to the senior team. That alone, I can guarantee to you, that has the kid very happy and pumped to keep doing things better because he was called to the national team. Do you really want to expose a player like that when you have a 1-0 that you can receive a goal at any time,
Yeah, it wasn't
and
the
the
right
amount of
situation.
pressure that that stadium is going to bring? That's where I feel like there's like we're in so much need of finding a star. This is coming from the guy who, uh, con humildad, I started a lot of this 14 years ago. Of course, I want players like him to succeed in the national team. But I've also learned throughout the years, how many times was Climaco called before he started playing minutes? He was on the bench for 3 or 4 matches, and he wouldn't get any minutes. So it's the window for a senior team a national team coach to see players is so small. The only window are those competitive matches, or you have friendly matches on FIFA windows. The fact that Gavi was called and has been observed
That's the
live,
first step.
that's the first step.
Yeah.
And
That's
and
what
and,
hasn't
and
happened with some of the US based players, for whatever reason. But this
yeah.
is this is the first step for Doniga to see, okay, that's great. You have your passport, you play for Palmeiras youth team, but do you have, the ability, do you fit into what I want? And that's how you go about it, not watching videos. And I doubt Lefes Food has a budget to go send them to scout him out in Brazil. So
Mhm.
this is the way to see this kid. And like you said, with the score line the way it wasn't the situation to give a debut. You couldn't risk that. Would it have been nice to lock him in just because? Great, yes. Have I seen this kid play? No, I haven't. I can't say that this kid is a savior. Who has seen this kid play other than the people that have scouted him? Like, it sounds nice on paper, it's cool and all, but it wasn't the situation for it.
He's a good player. I've observed him.
And that's what I
He's
wanted to ask you. Could you give us a breakdown of what you've seen of Gabriel?
Well, if we were to compare him against a player who we know who has played all the games, then he will be the natural substitute for Darwin, because he's a box to box player. He's a player who can defend, and he's also very skilled on the attack. He has good passing abilities.
So
He can
he's gonna
filter
be our
balls.
Fabinho pretty soon.
Potentially, but let's not forget that he's on loan
hmm
to Palmeiras U20.
hmm
Yes, the level is good. Yes, what we've observed is playing against other 18 and 19-year-olds. It's different when you're playing for a national team. Now, again, there's no formula for this. Clear example is Castillo. Castillo has yet to play a professional match,
hmm
and his performance in the national team has been above average.
But there was a build up to it. Like, he
Yeah,
debuted first for the youth teams, and then he made his way gradually to the senior squad after being called up and not debuting right away.
exactly. So, could Gabriel be a really good player for us? Yes, it's possible, but it's a
He's in
process, and it
development.
takes steps. He's in development in his club. He For the national team, it's a positive step. Hey, if he gets called up for the next official call up, that's a really good sign, because now the coach knows who he is, and I know the coach does his homework before even considering a player. So the fact that he was called is because he saw something good in him. And but again, I know the fans are the fans, but let's try to be more realistic. And again, I'm not extremely happy about the results. Like you said, yeah, we're struggling against the islands, but in part, I don't know if you ever had this thing where I recently turned 40, and for the
Congratulations. You're still a young man.
for the last for the last for the past 10 years, right? If somebody tells me, "Oh yeah, I have a car or whatever," and it's, "What year is it?" And they say, "Oh, it's 1998." In my mind, I feel like it's not that old because I'm kind of like, my mind stayed back then when a 1998 car was a semi-new car, you know? So I think that when it comes to the national team, we're still back in the late 90s, where or even early 2000s, where the Caribbean teams were made up of firefighters and construction workers who were not even fit, who would end up with an oxygen tank at halftime because they couldn't continue running. So I think that, yes, some of them are still amateur, but their level of amateur might be a little better than the level of our professional. I mean, again, I'm not saying that that applies to everyone, so I hope somebody doesn't mix up my words.
I
But
mean, yeah, like you said, if you if
they,
you
they've
if
gone
you
up.
put a if you put the second, third division in El Salvador under a magnifying glass, like you can reach certain conclusions as to the level of professionalism there, the level of competition there. I mean, it's just it has a label to it that makes it sound fancy, but like you said, I feel like overall the Caribbean is evolving. It's not just stuck back then. Like
Yeah,
you look at Suriname's potential lineup in June, and if you just look at where the players play, you could, that's a huge question mark in terms of how are you going to handle that, right? It's different on paper than on the pitch, but you look at that and you can, it opens your eyes. It's like, really? Like they have player, like almost their whole entire starting lineup is foreign based, plays abroad. Like that's a huge jump from what you'd expect in Suriname. You see the player from that played for what was it, Real Sociedad, if I'm not mistaken, that just scored against Barcelona right before the match window, and you're like, oh, we're gonna be playing that guy in June, like
yeah,
yeah, this isn't the 90s Caribbean anymore. I think the issue that I have with this tournament and the format is just the logistical part of it. Um, it also there's concerns that I've heard even from uh pundits talking about the League A, where you just get player or teams playing the same teams constantly. I think that's my main issue is you're getting the same type of game over and over and over and over again. So it's like it's all stuck in this cycle of playing similar opponents. And I mean, what's worse? So just playing Guatemala and Honduras for friendly matches or this? I don't know, take your pick. But I would really hope that at some point, you know, El Salvador doesn't get stuck playing the same type of opponents. Uh, it could be a blessing in disguise at the same time, right? You have teams in League A that still haven't qualified yet they were in League A. Like so it snuck in, but Guatemala, Honduras,
because
Costa
we're
Rica
better.
don't
Because
have
we're better.
don't have their ticket in hand to make it to Gold Cup. Like CONCACAF, what are you doing? But again, maybe it's a blessing in disguise, and we just have to learn to acquire the taste of playing, in the Caribbean. Um, I don't know. I hope there's some level of stability moving forward, or maybe the going up and down model kind of works too. We don't know. It's just a crazy format, crazy times. And I think we're going to close out with that. I mean, I think cooler heads will prevail. There's still question marks. Will Voniga stay past the new board? We have the FIFA transfer window opening up. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if something happened before that, if and obviously I have no information, it's pure speculation. But with the FIFA window transfer window opening up, your job security isn't necessarily there because there's a new board possibly coming in within the next 4 months. Do you look for greener pastures? There's still a lot up in the air. I personally would like to see this process continue. I hope it's uninterrupted by the current Regulizadora 3.0, and hopefully it's not interrupted by the new board coming in, because we've played this experiment of how much can we get out of a process by compacting it and interrupting it as much as possible. And here we have yet another experiment with Doniga that's lasted less than a year so far, and you start to see an upward trend. And to cut that process when we're 6 months away from qualifiers against a team like Suriname, I think would be disastrous, but yet very on brand for Azevedo. So questions loom. I think we close out 2024 in a positive way, on a positive note, despite all the BS, and we'll be hopping on and recording if anything happens in the meantime. But yeah, nothing's guaranteed in Salvadoran football. That's one thing. That's the one constant. All right. Well, I think that'll be it then. Thanks, Hugo, for hopping on and chatting. Remember, spread the word about the podcast. We always appreciate you tuning in and your support and your comments, your feedback. And once we get some more guests, we'll be hopping on. We have 6 months for 7 months for the next official match. I'm more than sure that there'll be friendly matches in between, and we'll have stuff to talk about. So in any case, enjoy the holidays, or at least Thanksgiving if you're in the US. And I think we'll try and get at least one more episode in before the end of the year. And in the meantime, stay safe with all the weather changes and whatnot, and we appreciate you. So have a good one.